Hello and good morning to all of my favorite people out there. Today we will be covering an unusual disappearance. But real quick, if you've been following along, I recently had hernia surgery performed, and boy has it been a long recovery. Anyway, last week I got the bill for said operation, and I nearly fainted. Last summer, after I got the diagnosis, I asked a hernia specialist before I had insurance, a whole fiasco in and of itself, and he had guessed what this procedure would cost out of pocket, and he roughly estimated $7,000. Cut to now, paying nearly $300 a month for health insurance because I knew this was coming, and my bill is still over $5,000. Keep in mind, this was a 2-hour go home immediately surgery, nothing insane. I'm just using this minute to rant about insurance companies, but thank you to the hospital for offering financial assistance. I contacted their money department, and luckily I qualify for a 68 to 100% discount. So shout out to healthcare professionals, and a big up yours to the insurance company. Sorry, thank you for listening. Let's get into it. This is the mysterious death of Dean and Tina Clouse. My name is Eli, and this is Murder in the Morning. My sources for today come from the Texas Observer, justicefordeanandtina.com, people.com, CBS News, Wikipedia, a KHOU article, and any others I will list down below. Harold Dean Clouse, who went by Dean, and Tina Gail Linn met as teenagers in Florida during the late 1970s and had what was described as a whirlwind romance, quickly leading to a courthouse marriage in June of 1979. Then, in the summer of 1980, this family of three moved to Texas to start anew, landing in Louisville, which is a suburb of Dallas. According to Wikipedia, quote, in the early 1980s, the Dallas-Fort Worth area was rapidly developing, creating this construction boom. Dean was an adept cabinet maker and moved his family to Texas in hopes of finding a good job in the trade, end quote. However, this dream would soon be cut short. In late 1980, mere months after their move, Dean and Tina completely fell out of contact with their families. The last piece of communication was a Christmas card featuring baby Holly and the two new parents. According to the Texas Observer, quote, Dean, Tina, and Holly had been out of touch for weeks when a man called out of the blue in 1981 to say he had found their maroon GMC van. He said he was arranging to have it driven back from LA to Volusia County, Florida, and sought to arrange a meeting at, of all places, the Daytona Speedway parking lot at midnight. So this is just odd all in of itself, but it gets weirder. A group of women drove up in the GMC that night. One introduced herself as, quote, Sister Susan. She looked to be in about her 30s, and both she and two younger companions wore long hair and loose white robes. Sister Susan alone spoke. She wanted Dean's mother to donate $1,000 in exchange for them returning their car. Dean's mother wanted to have them arrested. She figured that these women must know where her son was, and her son's wife and her son's baby. But instead she was only told, quote, he's joined our group and he's cutting off ties, end quote. So as if this situation wasn't weird enough with a missing family, right? Now you have these people demanding money in exchange for essentially their family's car and acting extremely vague about the whereabouts of Dean and Tina. So following this strange encounter, the families reported all three of them missing, Dean, Tina, and Holly. However, when officers heard their story, they assumed that the pair had left voluntarily, given that their car came back to Florida. But I see the opposite. Why wouldn't they return it themselves? Why is it coming back from LA when they moved to Texas? Or why wouldn't they have called or sent a letter to say, hey, this is what's up, you know? I swear, some police in the 80s were either the laziest or dumbest humans to ever exist. So as you can imagine, very, very little effort was put into finding this young couple and their baby. By authorities, that is. The families tried their darndest to spread awareness, even reaching out to the Salvation Army for help. Apparently, and this is extraordinary, I just learned this today, the Salvation Army held the largest database for missing persons in the 1970s. But they got nothing in return. And as years turned to decades, the family started to accept the fact that maybe Dean and Tina did leave voluntarily to wander off with this nomadic religious group, or whoever it might be. And it turns out that this wouldn't be Dean's first experience with one of these said groups. Quote, at 17, Howard Dean Clouse Jr. hung out with people his family called Jesus freaks. Cool bearded brothers and long-haired sisters who found converts in Central Florida's forgiving climate. By the late 1970s, the powerful Jesus People movement, which made the 1971 cover of Time with its beachside baptisms and chanting crowds, had already begun to lose its allure. And by 1979, Dean, too, had drifted away, end quote. But what if he found his way back? And what's the other option? They're missing? That's hard to swallow. I assume it's much easier to think that they left on their own accord. Quote, thousands of young people left behind families in the 1970s, although the groups were less popular by the 1980s. Some joined communes or wandering bands, or some self-proclaimed cults. In the trailer for a 2011 documentary titled God Willing, about an international religious group called the Brethren, one young man sent this letter home. Quote, dear family, don't worry about me. I've gone with the missionaries, the bearded ones, remember? To serve the Lord. This is what I want to do with my life. Don't fill out the missing persons report. End quote. However, this wasn't the case for Dean and Tina. Let's go back to 1981. As both of these families desperately searched for answers, another story unfolded 250 miles away from Lewisville, Texas. On January 12th of 1981, just north of Houston, 2 unidentified bodies were discovered in a swampy, wooded area after a dog returned to his owner with a decomposing human arm. According to Wikipedia, the bodies were found within a few feet of each other and assumed to have been killed at approximately the same time, leading investigators to believe the 2 bodies were a double homicide. Both had been dead for anywhere between a week and 2 months, heavily decayed, with the male body already having been partially skeletonized. The female had been strangled, and the male had been bound and gagged before being beaten to death. It is believed that the female victim had been attacked first, and the male victim attacked for attempting to defend her. Also found at the scene was a bloodied towel and a pair of gym shorts. But despite this significant decomposition, authorities were still able to sketch 2 reasonable faces and circulated those drawings to the public. However, this failed to turn up any leads, and soon the 2 victims were referred to as the Harris County Does. Sadly, as no one came forward with information and no one to fight for them, these 2 unidentified people were buried in anonymous graves. For decades they stayed there, unknown and alone. In 2011, a cold case unit reignited interest in this case and decided to exhume the 2 bodies for additional DNA testing and evidence. Authorities would then enter this DNA into national databases previously unavailable. Although a wonderful step in the right direction, it would be another 11 years before any real progress was made. In 2022, 2 women working with a group of genetic genealogists called Identifinders received funding to work on the Harris County Doe case. Quote, Misty Gillis, a working mom with a knack for computerized research who has cracked several IDs with Identifinders, followed the male's consumer DNA data trail to a hodgepodge of distant kin in Kentucky. Gillis partnered with Allison Peacock, an ex-Texan who's now an Albany, New York-based genetic genealogist, and Peacock began tracking the unknown woman's relatives, also as part of Identifinders. The duo's careful study of links between both branches of the unknown man's and woman's family trees soon bore fruit. Gillis began to zero in on a Kentucky family with the surname of Clouse, who had relocated to Florida. In only weeks, she found the phone number for the sister of a man whose remains had been unidentified for more than 40 years. Gillis, often shy about reaching out to the family, asked Peacock to make the call, and together they reached out to a woman named Debbie Brooks. End quote. In a slightly awkward conversation, they asked Debbie if she had any missing relatives, to which Debbie responded, "Yes, my brother Dean." And after a few minutes of light conversation, Debbie mentioned that Dean had a wife named Tina who had also disappeared. There it was. Gillis and Allison Peacock realized that they had just identified both victims in one phone call. On January 12th, Tina and Dean were publicly identified, which happened to be the 40th anniversary of finding their remains. But one question remained. Where was the baby? Where was Holly? Investigators and search parties scoured the area where Dean and Tina were found, but no trace of a small child, dead or alive, was recovered. If Holly wasn't found with her parents, does that mean she still might be alive? And so, again, identifinders went to work. Peacock, Gillis, and the families created the Hope for Holly project in an effort to raise funds to test the DNA of credible women who could be Holly. According to The Observer, Peacock said, quote, "After the story broke about Dean and Tina last week, the number of women who wrote to me hoping that they might be Holly has inspired her family and me to take action. Their stories were all compelling, and I didn't want to leave them hanging." In addition to this, an age progression of Holly was created, information was released to the public, and many family members submitted their DNA to genealogy websites like Ancestry.com in hopes of matching with Holly one day. Amidst this frenzy, the Linn and Clouse families met up outside the woods where their loved ones were found to commemorate their lives and offer hope to each other. Quote, "Later, the family drove to the Harris County Cemetery and formed a line in the stretch of freshly mown grass marked Section G for an impromptu graveside vigil. Dean's mother stood in the center, embraced on either side by the linked arms of 4 of her children." End quote. A few months later, and I wish I knew more of how, but Holly Marie was located. Whether she had written in or another family member had submitted DNA that matched, either way, they found her. On June 7th of 2022, Holly was located in Oklahoma, alive and well. Coincidentally, on what would have been Dean's birthday. When investigators reached out, she was wholly unaware of her dark beginnings. And while we don't know every detail of Holly's life out of respect for her privacy, she is living a wonderful life with 5 children and at least 2 grandchildren. You couldn't have asked for anything better than that, to go on and live a normal life after such tragedy. But still, so many questions remain. How did Holly get to where she was? Why did she survive when her parents didn't? According to People, quote, "Investigators learned that Holly Marie was dropped off at an Arizona church by 2 women who belonged to a nomadic religious group in November of 1980. Quote, "They indicated the beliefs of their religion included the separation of male and female members, practicing vegetarian habits, and not using or wearing leather goods. The woman indicated that they had given up a baby before at a laundromat." According to this article, this group was known to travel around Arizona, California, and possibly Texas. End quote. In an ABC interview, we later learned that Holly's adoptive father was the father, or priest, at the church where she was left. His name is Philip McGoldrick, and he gave Holly a beautiful life. Quote, "Philip has said that the 2 women who left Holly Marie also gave him Holly Marie's birth certificate, as well as a note reportedly written by Dean Clouse that waived parental rights to Holly." End quote. I guarantee that thing was forged. After Holly was located, the Hope for Holly project was renamed to the Dean and Tina Lynn Clouse Memorial Fund, shifting the focus to finding other unidentified victims. Quote, in the Memorial Fund's first sponsored case, Wilkes County, North Carolina native Virginia Higgins Ray was identified as a 1982 Columbia, South Carolina Jane Doe on Mother's Day 2023, end quote. So they are doing great work over there already. But remember, this case is still far from over. The killer or killers of Dean and Tina Linn have never faced justice. According to the Harris County Police Deputy Thomas Galilliand, this case is still active and ongoing, limiting what information is publicly released. However, we can say with near certainty that investigators are focusing on this nomadic religious group or groups of that era. It's too bad police didn't take that missing report seriously decades ago when, quote, Sister Susan tried to sell back Dean's car and lie about his whereabouts. I mean, had they already been killed at that point, or was that the first step in this cult plan? And then in 2023, a year later, it was revealed that this group or cult in question was the Christ family, a nomadic group founded by Charles Lightning Amen McHugh, which is the most cult leader name of cult leader names. Lightning Amen. Renowned cult expert and FBI consultant Rick Allen Ross firmly believes that this group is responsible. He says no other group matches this description so closely. According to Wikipedia, in a November 2023 interview with ABC on 2020, Holly Clouse revealed that she believes this religious cult her parents were involved with may have murdered them because they wanted to leave the group. And unfortunately, that's where we're at today. Holly is found, but her parents' brutal murder remains unsolved. If you happen to know anyone who messed with nomadic religious groups in the 1980s, please speak up. Share that bit. But that, my friends, is the mysterious death of Dean and Tina Linn Clouse. Thank you all so much for listening in today. I truly do appreciate it. And as always, if you'd like some more true crime, I invite you to stick around after the music. Okie dokie. Bye-bye. Hello. We have another cold case solved. Back to back. Titled, Man Convicted of Murdering Connecticut Mom Whose Daughter Remains Missing, by CBS. Quote, a Connecticut jury on Tuesday convicted a man of murder and evidence tampering in the 2019 killing of his girlfriend, while the disappearance of their young daughter remains a mystery. Jose Morales, 48, of New Haven, faces 25 to 65 years in prison when he is sentenced on July 8th for the beating death of Christine Holloway inside her home in Ansonia, about 10 miles west of New Haven. Morales testified at the trial in Milford that he did not kill Holloway. He said he, Holloway, and their daughter Vanessa, who was 14 months old at the time, were in Holloway's parents when two intruders broke in. He said one of the intruders attacked Holloway with a crowbar, and he was assaulted before they kidnapped Vanessa, who has never been found. Morales also said he was high on PCP at the time. Just threw that one in there. Days after the killing, authorities issued an Amber Alert for Vanessa, whose missing persons case remains posted on the websites of the FBI and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Ansonia police said in late 2019 that Jose Morales was a suspect in Vanessa's disappearance, but he was never charged. Local police said at the time that Jose lived at his parents' home in New Haven and was cooperating with the investigation after Holloway's body was found. Authorities added that the father occasionally stayed at the Ansonia home but didn't live there. Morales was later arrested on weapons charges, but those charges were not related to Holloway's death or Vanessa's disappearance. Prosecutors argued that Morales' story about how Holloway was killed did not match the evidence. During closing arguments on Monday, Supervisory Assistant State's Attorney Howard Stein said the evidence showed that Morales repeatedly struck Holloway in the head with an object and tried to cover it up by cleaning the crime scene. Morales admitted on the stand that he attempted to clean the apartment after Holloway was killed and had also put some of the blood-soaked evidence in a donation bin, which is insane to admit if you're trying to get away with this. Quote, "Why would you believe that home invaders who committed murder and kidnapped a child would leave behind a living witness? How does that make sense?" Stein asked in his closing argument. Morales' lawyer, Edward Gavin, in his closing argument, asked the jury, "Who calls 911 before committing a homicide?" No one. The question was referring to the call that Morales made before he allegedly killed Holloway. Gavin then replayed the call for the jury, saying, quote, "And don't forget that Christine Holloway's voice is in the background on the call. Christine was there." Gavin then declined to comment after the verdict. During his closing argument, he said there was no evidence that Morales had any intent to kill Holloway. The jury began deliberating Monday afternoon and reached a verdict Tuesday morning after about 2 total hours of discussion. Morales' bond was increased to $2.5 million following this conviction, and in Connecticut, a person who's been convicted of any offense is still eligible for bail while waiting for sentencing or an appeal. End quote. Aha! You are never safe from the truth. I hope that every murderer out there remembers that. The DNA will come for you. That is all I've got for you guys today. Thank you all again from the bottom of my heart for taking the time to listen in to me, of all people. If you enjoyed today's episode, please let me know down below or leave a 2-star review. Whatever it is, I would love to hear from you guys. Anyways, have a great rest of your week, and I will see you later. Okie dokie. Bye-bye. Love you.